Right, welcome to episode 2 of From The Finchale End, and I'm absolutely delighted to have Simon Brown join us. Mate, thank you so much. You were one of the senior players when I rocked up at Durham, carried the burden of the attack, led us very well in some tough times, mate. But once again, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Nice to catch up with you.
Excellent, mate. Excellent. For those that don't know, Chubby's full name, I've called him Chubby already, so there's one of the nickname questions gone straight away, is Simon John Emerson Brown, which sounds like he should have gone to a grammar school and been an opening batsman who played like 50 tests for England, but he's a Collery lad, shall we say. So run me through, Chubb, some of your earliest cricket memories and what got you into cricket.
Yeah, of course. Kind of earliest memories really was my granddad always used to watch the old Sunday League, the John Player League, as was at the time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the earliest interest I can remember having in cricket. He was a big sort of cricket fan.
Yeah.
My sort of parents and I've got 3 elder sisters, not kind of into sport generally. So I was kind of a bit of an anomaly in the family really. But like I said, my granddad was really into it. So we quite often used to go around there for something to eat on a Sunday, and I would quite often end up watching the cricket with him.
Yeah.
And back in those days, kind of every game seemed to be either Essex or Hampshire. So I'm sure the outside broadcast unit from BBC didn't go too far from home. So they always had to take me down in Southampton or Chelmsford. And they either were playing against each other, and Glamorgan seemed to turn up quite a lot, quite randomly, and Somerset as well. So it was only ever saw 4 teams really. But yeah, that was kind of the first thing that I could remember. Like I say, he was really keen. So that probably got me interested to start with, I think.
Brilliant. And how did that click into your junior cricket career?
I didn't sort of start playing until I started secondary school. So I think kind of 11-ish would have been the first time I started. And that was really just a couple of pals from school who had got into cricket. And that was, I played a little bit at school.
Yeah.
But around that sort of time was when we had the teachers' strike and the miners' strike. And the school that I went to was in at Bolton, right next to the Colliery Welfare.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of kind of sport outside of school, so extracurricular stuff. So the PE teacher was great, actually, to be fair. Anybody who showed any kind of interest or aptitude for any sports, he was very good at introducing you to local clubs, and that was probably the right environment for most of the lads anyway at that point. So played a handful of school games really, but like I say, got introduced to a club. A couple of pals from school were already playing there. And there was a chap, I don't know whether you remember, a guy called Alec Coxon, who was actually the coach at Bolton at the time. And he played for Yorkshire for a long time. In fact, he played one test as well.
Right.
And he was the coach, and like I say, it was all very kind of regimented, if you like. So practice was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Tuesdays and Thursdays was junior practice, and then Wednesdays was seniors. And if you were good enough, or when you were good enough, as a junior, you got invited to come and practice with the seniors on a Wednesday. So like I say, starting off playing a bit of under-13 stuff, and coaching, but like I say, coaching by him was good, very good. And Bolton, kind of looking back, I didn't realise at the time just how good they were at really sort of looking after and nurturing junior players who were brilliant at it. Even to the point when I first started to play a little bit more senior cricket, that I didn't play an awful lot of midweek cup tie stuff. I was kind of looked after really well. And again, sort of looking back, I didn't really realise that at the time. But now I do sort of take the time to sort of take a look back. There's a lot of people I've got to be sort of really thankful for that they kind of looked out for me, particularly as a kind of young bowler. Obviously, I did a sort of fair share at Durham, but as a junior, they kind of looked after your workload long before there were any kind of bowling restrictions or ECB guidelines or anything. They just kind of did that really.
Magic. Because there's quite a few, probably around your era, quite a few lads that went to play first class cricket around. So you've got Gareth Smith, I think, went down to Warwickshire, and you've got was it Grant Foster went to Leicester?
Yeah, well, so Grant Foster also played at Bolton. So Grant went to Northants first. Okay. So Grant was at Northants before I was.
Yeah. And
Gareth Smith, who you mentioned, both of us actually went down for trials together. So Gareth and I signed for Northants at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And then Gareth went to Warwickshire about the same time as I came back to Durham.
Okay.
So it was around that sort of time. But there was another lad, Martin Thursfield, who went off and had went off the MCC ground staff, I think, and then played a bit for Hampshire.
And the great Andrew Robson.
Andrew went to Surrey and then I think Sussex as well, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was always that tradition, particularly with Northampton. Sorry, there was a tradition of lads from the northeast getting picked up by local scouts, and Northampton was always a bit of a catchment for them.
Yeah.
So, like I say, there was myself and Gareth. Like I say, went together around that time. Jeff Cook, Peter Willey, in previous years had all been picked up from the northeast and ended up down there as well. So there was a bit of a tradition of that happening as well.
What was the connection there with Northampton, or is it just something that kind of happened naturally over time, or?
From memory, I think Doug Ferguson, who did a lot of coaching in the northeast, I'm pretty sure Doug and his brother, if I remember rightly, both had links to Northampton, and that's how that came about. So when I first sort of started playing more senior cricket at Bolton, then that's when I think Doug came down to have a look at one of the games that I was playing, and then got invited down for trials, which is when a lot of the counties, but Northampton would sort of host trials around the Easter break. So when you got a sort of couple of weeks off from school, they'd invite you down for a week, or possibly two, and then you would sort of, like you say, you'd go and trial with them nets, and then possibly play a couple of games for them and see how you went from there. And I was really fortunate at Bolton because the first game of the season, I was only 14. I'd played a few junior games and done okay, but the first game of the season, some of the senior lads thought it would be a great idea to have an overseas pre-season trip to France, which is an obvious thing to do, isn't it? And typically the ferry got delayed coming back into North Shields, and half the team weren't there. So they were scrabbling around to get a team out for the first game of the season. And like I said, I'd done okay in some of the junior games, and I was kind of sort of picked by default, really, and did all right. I thought I bowled okay and then had a decent game. And again, going back to the guys that were running the club, fair play to them. They said, well, why don't we just leave him in? You know, because we could drop him back in the seconds, and you know, he looks like he's got a bit about him. Why don't we just give him a go? And again, kind of they looked after me as well.
Brilliant.
So like I said, I was really fortunate that I had a bit of a break, and it went pretty well actually.
Great stuff, great stuff. So from Northampton, I think you've played about 15 first-class games. Like we had a little chat before we started. Well, I'm not massively into stats, but some pretty serious bowlers knocking around at Northampton at the time. I think Ambrose and Benjamin were there.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, so overseas players, and again, this was fantastic. So overseas players, Curtly Ambrose was there. Yeah. Winston Davis, Roger Harper when I first went as well, the West Indian off-spinner, fantastic cricketer. And then really fortunate that Dennis Lilly came over for a year. So spent a whole lot of time with him. So he did a bit of coaching while he was there as well as playing, obviously. Yeah. And learned a whole lot from him, and had a real pleasure to play on the same side as him a few times as well. That was brilliant, fantastic learning experience for a teenager at the time, really. But like I say, for a young bowler developing skills, and just watching somebody like that who, yes, it was towards the back end of his career, but still fantastic skills, and like you said, you couldn't fail but to learn from somebody like that. And he was great. He was a really good guy as well.
He's a really nice bloke. I used to see him running around one of the local ovals plenty of times. Yeah. He would always keep an eye on the nets and end up spending 20 minutes, half an hour with the young quicks who were trying to kill you at the time at Tuesday night on the 15 yards. But he is an absolute legend of Australian cricket, and probably a great time to be in contact with him, because when he was younger, he was obviously that tear-away quick, and he went through his back injuries and things like that. So really learned to be that medium pacer, and God, he turned into a fantastic cricketer.
One of my sort of very early memories at Northampton was playing a championship game against Gloucester, and it was his first game. And I think he literally got off the plane the day before, and conditions not dissimilar to where they are at the moment. Actually, it's really humid, buggy, and I'm sure he got 6 for nothing. Just made it talk, really. You watch somebody like Jimmy Anderson bowling at his prime, and it was very similar, because like you say, not kind of express pace anymore, but just fantastic control, and he just worked out every batsman how he was going to get them out. And I remember I was kind of feeling it mid on and mid off while he was bowling. And he was just saying, he said, "What do you think about this batsman? How do you think you would look to get him out, and what have you?" And everything was just a real learning experience with him. And I came on to bowl a couple overs just before lunch, and I think he'd kind of knocked the first 5 over by then. So, and he basically said, "Look," he said, "just run in and bowl as fast as you can." He said, "You can do what you want," he said, "because they're just going to try and get through to lunch now." And I think I managed to pick up another wicket before lunchtime as well. And it was just like, this is an easy game, isn't it? Why is it not like this all the time, really? But yeah, like I said, just fantastic experience playing with somebody like that.
Awesome, mate, awesome. And then you came back home, and Durham became a first-class county in '92. Yeah,
92, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you the spearhead of that for, you know, the best part of 10 years. Went through some stats last week with Rushy, and for a long time you were the record holder there. I think you ended up with 518 first-class wickets for Durham, which is a remarkable achievement. Especially through a lot of that period, we weren't the most successful of teams. It was fair to say, and there was probably a lot of overs and a lot of work for you back in those days.
Yeah, there was. I mean, that first sort of couple of seasons in particular, where Jeff Cook was sort of instrumental in me coming back as well, which really helped. That was great. But also sort of assembling a side of really sort of good players who probably had another 2 or 3 years left in them.
Yeah.
And like a lot of players do, change of scenery sometimes helps, and lads have a bit of a sort of swan song. So the likes of sort of Wayne Larkins, Paul Parker, both of them obviously, Simon Hughes from Middlesex, Phil Bainbridge, who really good pals with Baines. And just like you said, just a really good bunch, and obviously David Graveney as captain as well. So some really good, experienced players who, like I said, really made the most of what they had at that point. But also the fact that you played all of your home games at effectively outgrounds and smaller club grounds.
Yeah.
The spectators were pretty close to you, so there was always like a bit of an atmosphere. There's also the novelty value of a new county as well. So there was a whole lot of really sort of good things. And the first game we ever played was against Lancs, a one-day game down at Durham University at the Riverside. The university ground at Durham.
Of course, yeah.
And brilliant game, and we managed to win. And I remember one of the directors at the time, who remained nameless, as we walked out, just said, "Oh, just give them a good game," because Lancashire at the time were the one-day team in the country.
Yeah.
And typically both of them did virtually nothing throughout the game, and then turned up in the last over and ran somebody out to win the game for us. But the game kind of went backwards and forwards. I think Wayne Larkins got 50 odd really quickly. Dean Jones was out overseas. Dean got 100, I think. And we got a really good score. They got off to a decent start, and then we sort of pegged it back. And like I say, the game just went backwards and forwards. And then when it came to the crunch, the last over, I think they needed something like 5 or 6 to win. And both of them ran the last man out when they might be Danny Morrison, if I remember rightly, the New Zealand seaman. Yeah. But again, and sorry, the reason I'm saying that, the ground, because it's obviously not sort of fenced in and what have you, they had sort of big Hessian sheets up on poles and what have you. Well, they'd all just been taken down by the time the game started. And I think the capacity was supposed to be about 3,500, 4,000 was the safe capacity for the ground. And I reckon there was probably about 10,000 watching the game by the end. Even to the point where there was people sitting on the rooftops of the row of houses overlooking as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic atmosphere. And like I say, winning that was just getting off to a bit of a flyer. It was almost a bit of the sort of the champagne moment. But then the reality kind of set in when we started playing the 4-day stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we lost to Leicester first game there. And it was really noticeable that in the 4-day games, because we didn't have enough firepower with the ball, we were just getting bombed out by people. And we didn't have enough to sort of fight back with. The 1-day stuff, we had enough experience and nous to get through, and we're pretty competitive. Yeah. But it was just that 4-day stuff that we were going to struggle to take 20 wickets to pull people out, really.
Yeah. Like you said, some amazing characters there. And for those that don't know the racecourse, a bit like an amphitheatre as well. You've got the river on one side and then a big embankment up. So I can imagine it would have been an amazing atmosphere.
It was brilliant. Yeah, it was.
And probably a pretty good night afterwards, I would have thought.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few of those. But yeah, like you said, just that whole thing about the expectation of us not competing and then winning the first game against what was a very, very good side as well.
Yeah.
Quite pleased to play Lancashire without Wasim Akram. That's always a bit of a bonus. He was such a phenomenal cricketer for them. But yes, to win against, again, what was a very, very talented one-day team in particular, that kind of took a lot of people by surprise, I think.
Brilliant. And what was the change room dynamic like? So I can imagine it was kind of split with probably a real group of young and up-and-coming Mackhams and Geordies, and then this kind of older crew of legends of county cricket that have been there and done it. What was the changing room like?
The the kind of the more experienced guys that you're talking about were brilliant at being inclusive with everybody and making sure that regardless of whether you played 1 game or 500 games, you were still like really made to feel part of the team. Playing with somebody like both of them again was kind of a bit of a kind of dream for a lot of the younger lads who'd obviously watched him in his sort of pomp and what have you. And yes, he was kind of past his best, but he was still a fantastic cricketer and incredibly competitive as well. That was one of the things you just noticed straight away from day one. And the best thing you could do is just treat him like one of the lads. And if you treated him any differently, you found it quite difficult. But in the dressing room, when you're just kind of messing about as you would with the other lads, he'd be right in the thick of it, and he'd be the daftest of a lot, to be honest with you. So you never felt there was any kind of separation between, like you said, those more experienced players or the newer guys. They did a really good job. And fair play to Jeff, that was a big part of the recruitment as well in terms of the players that he brought in. It was always going to be players that were going to nurture new talent as well as just being able to perform as well. Yeah,
amazing stuff. Would have been a great place to be. Some proper characters with, like you say, Wayne Larkins and John Morris, a little bit further down, Beefy. Awesome stuff.
And like you said, I mean, obviously Graham Fowler joined us, not the first season. Graham came the year after as well. And like as I mentioned, Simon Hughes as well, and obviously Paul Parker was a really, really bright guy. I think Paul read classics at Cambridge, I think, and it's fair to say there weren't too many people in the dressing room who were doing that. So yeah, but like I said, really, really good guys.
Excellent stuff, mate. So your career, I think you took 50 wickets consecutively for about 6 or 7 years, and that led to a test call-up for you. You got to play against Pakistan.
That's right, yeah.
Talk me through the process of how that came about. So you've obviously taken a load of wickets, and run me through the kind of...
My first season, I think I got 50 wickets in the first season and did okay, more by luck than judgment, and lots of opportunity because there wasn't that many other people aboard, to be honest with you. So I didn't, if I'm honest, I certainly wasn't a finished article at that point. Second season, I kind of struggled for a while. I didn't bowl particularly well. I hadn't really, not prepared, but I hadn't learned anything new, and I hadn't improved from the year before. And one of the things that I kind of learned going into my third season was, if you don't get a bit better every year, you go backwards. And that was a bit of this kind of wake-up call, really. So I got a bit more methodical, is probably the best way to put it, in terms of preparation for the next season. So I quite often, as soon as the season finished, I would maybe have a week or two off, but then I would go straight back into fitness training. And I would try and learn a new skill up until kind of January, February time, whether it was a slow ball or whatever I was trying to learn to do. And then when we started practicing in earnest as a group, as a team, in February onwards, normally I was in pretty good shape fitness-wise, and I'd sort of developed something else, or I just got better at doing something. And I repeated that year after year. So I always had that kind of cycle that you've got the season, small break, bit of fitness, bit of skill work, and then start to prepare for the season come to the end of the year, really. And that stood me in pretty good stead, really. So when we had a couple of pre-season tours when we went overseas to South Africa and what have you, and by the time we'd gone overseas, I was ready for the season to start. You know, I was kind of in a reasonable groove and what have you. So I just found that sort of worked, and that was the difference with, like I said, light bulb moment, I suppose, that was the difference between not playing for fun, because you're always playing for a living, but actually being a proper professional and working out that, you know, you've kind of got to put the hard yards in, really, and just work a bit harder.
Yeah, that was, I mean, I must admit, when I first joined the club, that was one of the things that I took a bit of a shine to you for. That was something that I did notice. You're a bit like a Clark Kent, to be honest. I didn't realise you're a tank. You obviously you bowled a lot of overs, but you made sure you were in the best shape to start that season, because probably you knew that you had to bowl 1,000 overs a season as well. But, I used to love your work ethic in training, something that I probably didn't have, to be fair. But your work ethic was probably the one that drove the other bowlers in the group as well. So that was definitely.
I always, if we were sort of preparing for a game, if we had, say, we had net practice the day before, and if there was a kind of rota where we had sort of like, okay, we're going to have 3 bowlers who are going to bowl at these 2 batsmen for the next half hour or whatever it is. If I didn't feel right at the end of that half hour, I would always come back and bowl another spell until I knew that I was ready the following day.
Yeah.
And I remember actually when Martin Moxon came as coach, and I was chatting to Martin, and I said, I just want to bowl another spell later on because I'm not quite right yet. And Martin was quite sort of quite not rigid, that's not fair, but he's quite processed in terms of the way he likes to run his practice sessions and what have you. And I said, I'll go and bowl on my own if you don't want me to bowl at any of the batters. And I remember having a conversation. He said, you need to rest and what have you. I said, no, I will. I said, but I know I need to bowl a little bit more to make sure that I'm ready for tomorrow when the game starts. And it was just like he said, that was just something that I knew myself, that once I got in rhythm and I knew I'd bowl a couple of balls and like, yeah, it's okay now. I'll be ready tomorrow now. Because again, going back to the early days where I didn't really know what I was doing properly. If I was having a bad day, I didn't, there's kind of nowhere to hide because there's nobody else going to bowl. And you keep getting thrown the ball. It's like if you go around the park, it's a pretty lonely place. So that's, like you say, that just sort of made me think a bit more about the way that I prepared.
Absolutely. And so your England call-up, how did that come about? So talk me did you receive a phone call?
Yeah, I mean, these were the days before mobile phones, remember? I got a call in the dressing room at Worcester, which is where we were playing a 4-day game, to say that, excuse me, saying that I was going to be included in the squad for the next test match. And I think we were picking 13, if I remember rightly. And the first game was at Lord's, was the test match that I played. And like I say, we were at Worcester for a 4-day. And I think I got 5 or 6 wickets at Worcester, if I remember rightly, bowled okay and doing sort of quite nicely. And I got a phone call from David Graveney, who was nice because Grav had obviously been captain, but he was chairman of the selectors at the time as well. And he rang me up and just said, you're in the squad for the test match. And those were the days where you had a Sunday league game and a championship game kind of split sometimes.
I was going to say it would be a couple of days championship cricket, a Sunday league,
right.
And then finish it, right?
And then you'd come back and finish the championship game. And I think we were batting last, if I remember rightly, in the championship game. And I forget who was captain at the time, but whoever was skipper at Durham at the time said, if you don't want to play the Sunday league game to make sure God forbid you get injured in a Sunday league game and you can't play the test match, he said, if you don't want to play tomorrow, I'm quite happy to sort of leave you out. And I think it might be Booney at the time anyway. So that's what I did. I didn't play on the Sunday. And I got another phone call. Somebody said, are you injured? Is the reason why you're not playing? I said, no, the reason I'm not playing is to make sure I'm not injured. So, so and then the way it worked from there was test match started on the Thursday, squad gets together, practices on the Tuesday and the Wednesday. Sort of proper training session on the Tuesday, a bit lighter on the Wednesday. And really just then you go have sort of a team dinner on the Tuesday night just to get to know everybody. So there was sort of Alex Stewart and Graham Hick, lads who I'd sort of played against and thought, these are serious players, but I don't really know these lads that well. Mike Atherton was captain, and I played quite a lot with Mike because he'd been captain when I played sort of under 19s and things. So he was of an age with me, where the other lads who were perhaps a little bit older, I didn't know them so well. So it was nice just to sort of get to meet them and have a chat with them. And Jack Russell was playing as well. He's a real character. Ian Salisbury, the leg spinner, who again, because he's a similar age to me, I played a bit more with Sols. Mark Elam as well, I played quite a bit with, and Corky as well. And Alan Mullally, again, played a little bit with Al. So I knew most of them, but like I said, there was just 2 or 3 that I didn't know so well. So it was nice just to go and have a bite to eat with them and have a natter, really.
Good stuff. So the test match, couple of overs in, 1 for. This is easy again, probably thinking.
Yeah, the kind of 5 days just went in a bit of a blur, really. Fantastic playing in front of a full house as well, because again, unless you play in kind of semi-final or final of the 1-day stuff, you don't really play in front of massive crowds, really. So really good atmosphere, beautiful weather conditions. The sun just, I don't know, it was a cloud in the sky for 5 days, really. The thing that kind of worked against me was that you could either use dukes or readers in the test matches. And I'd got all of my wickets all year swinging the ball using dukes, and then Pakistan won the toss and said, oh, actually, we fancy using readers. I was like, right, okay, that's not going to help me, but never mind. It is what it is. And both Wasim Akram and Waqar Yunus were playing for Pakistan at the time, and they were both kind of real masters of reverse swing,
Yeah.
and the readers were just better at for doing that basically. So they chose to go with that. And they had Mushtaq Ahmed as well, the leggy, who again fantastic bowler as well, and they were a really strong side. A great game. I think Inzamam got 100. I think 140. I think he played really well first innings, and we looked like we were going to save the game, but then Mushtaq. I think Mushtaq got others out when we looked like we were going to sort that out. And then once they got one end open, Akram and Yunus just went into a different gear. And bowled.
Different game, isn't it, with that reverse swing?
Absolutely brilliant.
Oh.
But I noticed it was a different game when I went out the back, because I was quite pleased to get off the mark and get away from Akram. Then I had Yunus at the other end. So kind of, what's the lesser of two evils, really?
Yeah.
In fact, I think Akram hit me in the neck first ball, if I remember rightly.
I was just about to say, with them two, it's either head or toes, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it was head. It was head first up. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Akram got me like just kind of around the back of the neck. A bit of more of a, not a sort of full-on blow, but that was the first ball that I faced. Yeah. I thought, right, okay, this is what it's all about, is it? So.
Oh wow! I remember Lancashire toured Perth, and they played a game against Scarborough on the pre-season tour, and Akram came over, and I think I was about 15 or 16, so they said, "Oh, a couple of the young blokes will play." Thankfully, one of them wasn't me. But a mate of mine, Robbie Baker, you call him, an absolute superb player. He said he was batting, he says you could see it, but you just couldn't hit it. He says it was just there and then gone. He says he's never faced anything like it.
He was a genius. I've never seen anybody else bowl like him, whether he's bowling over the wicket, round the wicket, and just making it, like you say, just talk, really. And if you look at, like you said, that Lancashire side who were very strong, it was like having three players when he was playing for you.
Yeah. And
we played a couple of one-day games at Old Trafford. And I remember being in the dressing room once. It was one of the games that we were really in contention. We were chasing, and we were playing really well. And we were talking in the dressing room. I was saying to some of the lads, "Don't forget, guys. Akram's going to come back and bowl the last 3 or 4 overs that he had left." I was saying we need to have the game won before he starts bowling again, or 90% won, because it's a different game against him than it is against everybody else, basically. No disrespect to the rest of the Lancashire lads, because they were really good, but I said that's a completely different game. And sure enough, he came back and just cleaned us out. Picked up the last sort of 4 wickets in a couple of overs, I think, sort of just bowling fast, swinging Yorkers and what have you. It was like, yeah, it's a different game when you're playing against somebody like that.
Brilliant, man. Absolutely superb. A story that will have been told probably thousands of times is Chris Scott dropping Brian Lara.
Yeah,
people don't realise it was that you were the bowler. You nicked him off, and you're probably just giving it your duty to your Brian, and then he shelled it, and then 490 later.
Yeah.
Mate, incredible. Run me through your thoughts at the end of that day.
Well, I mean, the whole game was a bit bizarre, really, because it was rain affected, so each team only batted once.
Okay.
And again, there was a Sunday League game in the middle as well. So we batted first and got 600 for 9. John Morris got a double 100, if I remember rightly. In fact, everybody got runs. But John got a double 100, played brilliantly. And then we bowled at them just before tea on day 2, I think it was. And Anderson Cummins, West Indian lad, was our overseas player. And Anderson said, I've got a theory as to how to sort of get Brian out. Now, at this point, Lara had scored something like 8 centuries in a row in the previous 8 championship games coming into it. He'd broken all sorts of records. He was playing a different game to everybody else at that point. So Anderson, quite rightly, said, actually, Brian gets quite a long way across the crease when he first goes in. He said, I'm going to try and set him up and sort of drag him outside off stump. And then I'm going to see if I can try and bowl him around his legs. I was like, okay, fair enough. I've not seen it done before, but, brilliant. Let's have a go. And he did it brilliantly. So he set him up for an over and just dragged him further and further outside off stump, and then went really wide of the crease and speared one in round the back of his legs and knocked his leg stump out. And it was a no ball. So we were all, okay, fair enough, great theory. We're going to try that again. It might not work twice, but anyway. And he played and missed, and Anderson bowled a fantastic bouncer, and he spliced it just over the keeper's head. And it was like, he really didn't look like somebody who just scored 8 centuries in a row, basically. He looked really out of touch. And the tea break came, and instead of kind of going into the dressing room for something to eat, he went straight over at the nets and got one of the lads just to go and throw him some balls, and just stood there and hit throwdowns for 15, 20 minutes before he came back out. So we were in the dressing room, and Phil Bainbridge was captain. And Baines said, "I tell you what, we'll try something different." He said to me, he said, "Chuck," he said, "you bowl the first over from this end." He said, "We'll just see if, change of luck, see what happens." So first ball after tee, it just came out really nicely. Just a little away swinger from him, little feather straight through to Chris. And by his own admission, he just said, "I wasn't concentrating." He said, "Just went straight in and came straight back out again." And I'll admit the expletives, but he more or less said, "I bet he gets 100." And after that, he kind of just teed off. He must have just thought, "Hang on a second, this is my day. I'm not feeling great, Nick, here, but I'm just going to give it a go and see what happens." And like you say, he just went into a different gear. And there was a massive boundary on one side and a really short boundary on the other. And it just seemed that he hit a 3 off the last ball of every over. And fair play to his fitness as well. I mean, he just kept running up and down all day as well.
Yeah.
But it just seemed like he scored a boundary in a 3 every over. And he never really got the ball at anybody else. So I think he gave another half chance when he was on about 470 or something. But it was phenomenal. I've not seen anybody play like that.
To get through the 470s, mate.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And then, of course, when he was on 4, so bear in mind it was a championship game and there wasn't going to be a result. He didn't realise that the game was going to finish at 5:30.
Yeah.
So you don't play the last half hour if there's not going to be a result. And he was on 497, and John Morris was bowling that because it was kind of we're just resting the bowlers by this point.
Yeah.
So John Morris was bowling that, and he was on 497. And Wayne Larkins, to be fair, Wayne walked up and said, "Brian, you do realise this is the last over, don't you?" And he was like, "No, we've got another half hour to go." Yeah, he said, "No, this is the last over of the game." And John bounced him next ball, and he didn't know what to do. It was like, "Well, should I hit it for 4 or 6?" And he just stood there to hit him on the head. And everybody just sort of stood and looked. And then literally I think it was the last ball of the over, and he just backed away and just whacked it through cover for 4 to get the 501. But yeah, he could have quite easily, I mean, I'm sure the umpires might squeeze another over in, but he could have quite easily fallen short because he thought he had another half hour to bat.
Good stuff, mate. Good stuff.
I think at the end of the game, I think because like you said, because there was so much rain affected, we only ended up playing sort of 1 innings each. I think they got 8 points and we got 7. But he got 500. So
absolutely incredible. Right, mate. Tell us a little bit. We'll move away from cricket. Tell us what keeps you busy outside of cricket. So I know that you pretty much moved into business at Northern Rock when you finished your cricket career. So talk to me what's happened since.
Yeah, so when I first finished playing, I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I got a start at Northern Rock, like you say, and the bank was doing incredibly well at the time, taking people on, so got a start there. That went really nicely. Started off as an underwriter, actually. Started off underwriting mortgages. Moved into sales fairly quickly, found that was more my sort of thing. And obviously banks all over the place had the troubles that they did sort of 2007, 2008. Yeah. Spent another few years in financial services, but then went down to London to work for PwC. Yeah. So I led a sales team for PwC for sort of 4 or 5 years. And then moved on from there back into cricket, went to work for the ECB for a little while. So again, I was asked again to sort of head up the kind of what was effectively was a national team of sports development managers, really. So again, with the sales angle, just with cricket being the product, if you like, really. Did that until sort of back end of last year, November time, and then left and went off on my own, sort of self-employed, doing sales coaching and personal development coaching and kind of business consulting, really, just helping businesses sell more and make more cash, basically. That's the kind of sort of stuff I've been doing. Started playing basketball again a couple of years ago, like oldest player in the league by miles, probably. But anyway, really enjoy that. So I used to play a lot when I was younger, so got back into that. That's been really good fun. And actually, I joined the British Basketball League as an independent director as well a couple of years ago. So I've been doing that for a couple of years. So that's been really interesting, and just trying to help them at the moment, see if we can get them back on TV. So see if we can get the sport back on one of the channels. Not sure which one yet, but just busy working on that for them right now as well. And lockdown's been it's just put everything on hold, really. Things have just been pretty quiet, so I'm sure it has been for a lot of people, but but that's kind of what's sort of been keeping me busy, really.
Great stuff, mate. Great stuff. I can remember pre-season. I think we were down at York, and it was pouring down with rain. And Colin Sanctuary got us inside and went, right, we'll have a game of basketball. And I've played a little bit as well as a young fella. I think me and you were on the same team, and everybody just kept looking at us. All I did was just give the ball to you, and it was pouring left, right, and centre.
I really enjoyed it, to be honest. And when what I was saying before about sort of fitness training and what have you between seasons, it's Newcastle Eagles now, but when they used to be the Sunderland franchise, I used to train with them in the winters as well. So I'd be kind of going basketball training 4 or 5 times a week, again with a reasonable sort of good standard of players. So it just fitness-wise, it was great. You were always kind of, your cardiovascular fitness was great at that point. So it made it a lot easier rather than kind of making yourself go to a gym and do different workouts. It's just the fact that if you run around for a couple of hours playing a sport that you love, you don't really think about it so much. But like you say, that was really good fun, and like you say, hard work as well, because there's some big lads to play against.
I can imagine. Great stuff, mate. Right, what I did with Rushy last week is I did a little segment of kind of 6 questions on
of course,
past and teammates and stuff, which will be with you. First of all, which was your favourite ground to play at?
I always liked it when you got away from the main county grounds. So we played 2 years at the Cheltenham Festival. So we played Gloucester down at Cheltenham, which was really nice because, like I say, it's a smaller ground. You tend to have sort of marquees all the way around. And like you say, the spectators are just closer to you. Yeah. It's a really good playing surface as well, actually. It's a really good pitch to play on. So places like that I always really enjoyed because you just felt like it was a bit more of an atmosphere, and they were really good fun. And on the circuit itself, probably Worcester was probably the prettiest, nicest place to play. Always nice to get away from, like I say, the test grounds are great. They're a good experience to play there.
Yeah.
But again, for a county game where you tend not to have massive crowds in, you just tend to find that, like I say, that it's difficult to get too much atmosphere. But Worcester was always quite well supported as well. And again, it's not a huge ground. You've got people sort of pretty close to you as well. So that was pretty good fun there.
Great stuff. So I've called you Chubby from second one. Is there any nicknames that you were called, or has it always been Chubby?
For as long as I can remember, to be honest, I think it was Jeff Cook who christened me that. Again, going back years now, but I think it's kind of stuck, and pretty much everybody who's got the surname Brown seems to end up with Chubby, I think. Obviously, coming from the northeast as well, I think that's probably got a lot more to do with it. But I'm not alone, I don't think. I think there's a few now.
Brilliant, mate. If you had to pick 3 of your former Durham teammates for a night out, who would they be? You've got quite a selection here.
That's really difficult because I always, sort of looking back, I always think I kind of played through 3 eras. There was that early era where you had the kind of the old guard, if you like, the guys that we talked about earlier on.
Yeah.
Then we went through, like you say, a bit of a tough time where we didn't win an awful lot. And then the kind of where we started to turn the corner was when David Boone came over as captain. And what I would say is it was a really kind of workmanlike team started to win some games. And that was probably the time where you felt like if you were going to go out and have a drink and something to eat, it just felt like you'd earned it a bit more.
Yeah.
Whereas previously, if you're losing all the time, it kind of gets you down a little bit. So to pick 3 would be really hard. But what I would say is probably that era where Booney came over, and like I say, we started to be a better team, basically. There was sort of Alan Walker, John Lewis, Nigel Kent, the physio, was always there. Nigel, if ever there was a beer and a pizza to be had, Nigel was never too far away. Mike Foster, all-rounder, was kind of did really well in that sort of era as well, and kind of Booney himself, really. So pick 3 from 5 if you like from there. But that was like I say, that was the time I think where it just felt like because we were a lot more competitive and a better side.
Yeah.
When you did, like you say, go for a beer and a bite of weekly, it felt like you'd earned it a bit more.
Yeah, rather than drinking our sorrows away on a few nights, which we no doubt did. 3 teammates who you wouldn't pick in your quiz team.
Oh, only 3. First one would be Collie. Collie's got it's not because he's thick, because he's not, but he's got the attention span of a goldfish. So asking him to sit through a few rounds of questions, you're just wasting your time. So definitely wouldn't pick Collie. Phil Mustard, Colonel, probably if there was a horse racing round, I'd be quite happy with him on horse racing. But beyond that, not quite sure about general knowledge. Who else? Oh, Stephen Lugsden.
Lugsy.
So for those who remember Lugsy as well, similarly again, Lugsy's probably just not really that bothered about general knowledge. He was bothered about bowling a cricket ball at 100 miles an hour, which he was pretty good at, to be fair to him.
Definitely.
But probably not his strong point for general knowledge, I wouldn't have thought.
He's still going. He's still playing Lugsy, but he's at Gateshead Fell now, and his young fellas are there. So he's
brilliant.
having
Good.
the odd game of club cricket.
Oh, he's great. He's a fantastic lad.
Fantastic fella. Which, and you can name as many as you want here. Who'd be the last bloke to get around in?
Oh, Stuart Hutton, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt.
Easy.
And I remember both of them stitching him up at the bar one night. The odd occasion where you did actually catch him at the bar when he wasn't hiding around the corner. He had to be fair to him. We bought a few drinks for some of the lads, and like you said, both of them came down, and you could see the look of fear on his face when Beefy came to the bar. And he sort of said, "Oh, can I get you a drink in?" He said, "Would you like a bottle of something?" And Beefy just said, "Yes." I don't think he thought that he was going to get the most expensive bottle of red wine. I think he was thinking possibly like a bottle of lager or a bottle of beer or something. But Beefy said, "Yeah," he said, "I'll have a bottle of that red, whatever it was." And fair play, he did buy it for him. But yeah, Stu was never the first to get to the bar, to be fair to him. Good lad, really very, very good player as well. He's one of the best fielders I think that I've ever seen.
Yeah, he was a left-hand opening back, wasn't he?
He was, yeah, like that, and a really, really elegant player. He's a spectacular fielder as well. He's brilliant.
Two questions to finish off.
Yeah, of course.
If you won the lottery, what would be the first thing you'd spend your money on?
Oh, crikey. A place in Portugal, probably.
Portugal.
So I like sort of holidaying in Portugal. Tend to go there sort of fairly often. Done it a couple of times reasonably recently, where I've gone away for kind of Christmas and New Year, and headed down there. And it's because you kind of guaranteed, or within reason, you guaranteed sort of half decent weather. Having somewhere to go there as a kind of second place, I think that would be kind of first choice. I would have thought.
Yeah, beautiful. Remember,
maybe a car on the horizon as well. I would have thought, but I think that might do it.
Take care of itself, that one. Last one, mate. If somebody was to play an actor of you in your life's movie, who would that actor be?
Oh, blimey, that's hard.
No, I forgot to ask Rushy this one.
Oh, great. James Nesbitt.
James Nesbitt, good shout. Good shout. Good.
It might be a challenge for the accent, but we'll see how he goes.
Wonder what his left arms are like, mate.
Yes, how he goes. I like him. I think he's funny. I think he's very good as well. But yeah, good question. Yeah, good question.
No worries, mate. Well, Chubb, that's all we've got time for tonight, mate. What I really want to do is thank you.
My pleasure.
Absolute pleasure to talk to you, mate. It's been far too long, and hopefully we can catch up for a beer once all this lockdown's done.
Yeah, love to. Cheers, mate.
Good on you, mate. Take care. Cheers.
All right. Cheers, mate.